This is Groundeffected, my name is your dad, and this video was sponsored by Abe3D. I'll tell you more about them in a minute, but let's just get this model Abe3D is a Patreon over on Patreon where you can get yourself some amazing models, and usually he sculpts in 1/4 scale, but you can print them in 1/6 scale as well. You get a massive welcome pack and a load of things that come with your first purchase, so please go and check them out in the description down below. Just this month alone, your releases are absolutely incredible. You will get a bunch of models not only from your download, but you will also get a welcome pack which has so many awesome models. Go and check them out in the description. I will leave a link and let them know that I sent you. The model that I'm painting in this video is this Jean Grey, and Abe's very kindly asked me to paint it, and I have got it now prepared and ready for the next steps. But there was a problem, and the problem was that in all of my infinite wisdom, I had printed the entire model except for the torso. And also, I had a little bit of a problem with a couple of holes going all the way through the model like a schmuck, so I printed 2 extra parts too, one of the boots and the head as well. Now that those parts had been prepared, obviously I'm going to move on to painting this model, and I'm going to start out with the cape, or whatever it is that's on the base, which essentially needs to be black and also red. So I started out with the red first by giving it a red paint on the red areas, obviously, and I used a red ink to paint the rose that goes onto that as well, and I chose to do 2 different colors so that they just wouldn't get mixed up a little bit later on. For the whip, I literally just painted that black and gave it a little bit of a greenish color for a highlight, and then put some semi-gloss over it and left it to dry for a day or so. I'm now going to quickly work on the base tones for my skins, and my base tone is always going to be, in most cases anyway, a pinkish color, and this color I like to refer to as pinkle. It is basically the color between purple and pink. I want to quickly talk about the base on this model because this is my favorite part of this model, and I'm going to do some marbling effect. Now, in order to do this, you need to start out with a color that's a little bit brighter, and you need to get yourself a wet wipe. And once you've got your wet wipe, you leave it to dry for at least a couple of hours so it's nice and dry, and then you stretch it apart. Once it's stretched apart, it creates these little cavities in between, which is going to essentially be our mask for making the marble effect. I'm going to use whatever means necessary to have it tied down and as tight as possible against the surface that I want to paint the marbling effect on, and once that is tied down, I'm going to start adding some colors, and I'm going to start out with black at first, and I figured I might as well just use the primer since it's right next to my table where I paint, and I don't need to thin it down or anything to paint this. I'm going to then take that off and allow it to dry. Once it is fully dried, I'm going to replace that piece of tissue over the top, and because I have replaced it, the little pieces are not going to be there in the exact same place. So this kind of helps. Doing the steps like this really helps to take it off and put it on and take it off. The real trick though is to add the tint of color over the top of everything that I put down in order to really sell the effect of that marbling effect. And then to actually complete this base, I need to paint back over the bottom portion of it with a solid black, because that needed to be black. Now, of course, I could have masked that out and just painted everything as it was going, and then not have to do the whole painting black back to black, but I'll be honest, I feel like it'd take me less time to just paint the black back on it. Speaking of black, I'm also going to paint all the main sections of this cape thing on the base with black. It looks like in the renders that there is a little bit of red on the inside of the cape, and so I had some of the upturned sections in red. I did both of these parts before coming in and spraying a gloss clear coat over the top. This is just a really cheap gloss clear lacquer that I got from one of the cheap stores down the road, and I spray that over everything. I'm going to quickly add the red that I was talking about earlier on that rose on the base, and I used an ink for this rather than using the same red as the cape, because again, looking at colors like this, for example, colors are different, and as you can see, my primer is a very different color to the black that I'm using to paint this model. Now, of course, I'm going to need to paint a couple of things later with a brush, and I'm going to be using the Vallejo model black, and so this makes sense for me to paint this over all of those sections that are going to be black later. This helps it to just tie in and be the same color when we get around to painting the other sections that need painting by brush. Speaking of brush, I'm also going to be painting in some matte over some of the inner sections of that cape, and that probably might not really work for it being a latex thing, but I decided that there needed to be a different texture on the inside as there were to the shiny gloss of the latex outside. On the base, the last thing that's left to do is to paint the logo of the Hellfire Club thing that is inside the base. Luckily, this is risen nice and high, so I'm going to use some deck tan and a little bit of dexterity, because you cannot touch any of this gloss clear within the first few hours, otherwise you will definitely leave fingerprints and you're going to have a sad time. It's bad enough that you can clearly see the dust particles in the surface of my paint, so let's not add any fingerprints to that mess. I used a ball red, which dries in a matte but not so matte form, and I really like the contrast between all the different colors. This means that that little logo thing is a different color to the red with a different kind of surface area, and the gloss and everything, it all stands off of each other and they look nice and different. I can quickly now move on to painting some of the other parts of this model, and I'll be totally honest, this model is a fairly simple model to paint, albeit with a couple of little fancy tricks up your sleeve in order to paint this thing the way you want to. One of those things is to be doing the whole putting the gloss stuff down and painting back over the parts that you don't want gloss with a matte varnish, but we'll get to that a little bit later. For now, I'm going to quickly put some dark silver onto all of the belt and buckle things that are strapping all over the legs and shoes and all the rest of it, and I do both the legs and shoes at the same time. You can see I'm doing the little zipper over here, but I do these at the same time so that it's easier for me to just paint them with the gloss clear together, and then I can put them onto the base. This is going to help me make sure that things stay the right colors and there's no weird things happening in between, but again, I want you to notice that I'm not touching any of this clear, and I'm using tools and holding on to the pegs and all sorts to just try and make sure I don't touch the clear. Genuinely, if you paint a clear gloss over something, you want to leave it for like at least a day or two, and before you even think of touching it. Otherwise, you're gonna cry, and don't say I didn't warn you. Getting back to the skin tones, I'm gonna paint a red ink into the shadows and then start out with this old rose color. Now, this was a mistake. I did not want to use this color, however, because I have already started, it makes sense for me to spray this color over all the rest of the body parts so that there isn't a weird or clear change in color when I do come to use the color that I wanted to use, which was brown rose. And for some reason, old rose and brown rose, they're not the same family. Well, they are, but they just don't go down the same. And it was the brown rose that I wanted to use as the main base for my skin tones. Now, you may notice that this already looks like a pretty decent skin tone, and you could probably stop at that point, but I like to take this a whole lot further and really push these colors so that I have a really strong contrast between my brights and my darks, because this helps me to shape all these parts a little bit more and get a little bit more definition out of the paint that I'm putting onto the surface of this model. I'm going to start working my way up with brighter and brighter colors. I used a sunny skin tone, and then I used a basic skin tone, and you can see as I'm doing this, the saturation starts to disappear out of the skin. It also is getting brighter and brighter, and I need to bring that saturation back. And so to do that, I usually will use a little bit of this orcish dermis. I thin this down quite a bit, and I spray this mostly into the shadows and the bendy parts like the armpits and behind the back of the knees, underneath the chin, etc, etc. Then I'm going to come back with some basic skin tone, because usually the whole orcish dermis layer, it tends to muddy up things a little bit, but I can force the light even more by doing one more round with basic skin tone. And when I'm done with this round, I will take a bit of white ink and I'll put that into that basic skin tone and really force the highlights where I want them to be. These are very small specular highlights, and I'm watering down the paint quite a bit. Speaking of watering, I'm going to use a very watered down ink, which is yellow, and I'm going to spray that over the top of all of the skin, and as you can see, that helps to bring a little bit of that saturation back to the skin. I'm now going to do a layer which you may think is just a waste of time, but I'm going to spray some semi-gloss over all of the skin tones before starting to work on the rest of the suit. Now, you remember when I said that there is a difference between the primer and the black that I'm going to be using to paint with the brush, and this is the time where I was going to be painting it with a brush, and because of that, that is the reason why I decided to spray on those black areas that didn't need to be brushed with the brush, because it made sense to have them the exact same color as the color that I'm going to paint later with the brush. As you can see, I've painted that over the arm section area. I'm also going to paint that over all the rest of the areas that needed to be painted black, and when I'm done with that, I'm going to put obviously a gloss clear coat over the top of them. Now, this is going to ruin the skin tones, but we'll get to that part when we get to that part. For now, I'll just let you see me painting all of the black parts. So painting the gloss over everything is going to go over the skin tones. There's nothing I can do about that unless I wanted to mask it off. And again, I'm thinking of efficiency here, and in my case, this luckily worked out in my favor. And all I did was take a matte varnish after everything had dried and painted that over all the skin bits, which took it back to somewhat of a semi-gloss or satin kind of look. You do need to be careful with this, and I do water this matte varnish down with a bit of water in order to make it lay nice and flat over the surface. It's the exact same as painting with any other color. It needs to be flat, so the water helps to do this in very thin layers. And I'm going to repeat this process for the torso section. The hair's base color is going to be this burnt red, and I'm going to spray this through my airbrush over the top of the hair pieces that are separated from the rest of the model. And while those pieces dry, I'm going to just quickly paint the matte varnish over the skin torso section. And this, again, like I said, just water this down. If you do this straight out of the pot or straight out of the bottle, you're going to end up with streaks, and it's going to look really terrible, and you're just going to have a bad time, really. So don't do it straight out of the bottle. Just literally put a little bit of water, I put it on my wet palette, and I paint it as such. I need to put these parts together because I'm busy filming this model on the same day, and so this is a risk. If you ask my opinion, I would have left this for a whole day to dry before even building this model, but I do not have the luxury of that time, and so I need to just keep pushing forward. And to push forward even further, I'm going to quickly paint the head while the rest of that stuff dries pretty much assembled in front of me on my table. I'm quickly going to stick in this little hairpiece, and I'm using some activator and CA super glue in order to make sure that that thing sticks, and it sticks really quick. Her little necklace needs to be painted with black in the same way that I painted the rest of the body, but I do not feel like it's going to be worth it to spray this entire head section with a gloss clear in order to paint back the hair and also the face and all the rest of it. So I literally just put a gloss clear coat over the top of just the necklace section itself. I'm going to use some dark shades into the hair. This is a dark brown, and I'm going to spray this on a low air pressure through my airbrush into areas that I feel need to have some depth in them. On her lips and mouth, I'm going to paint a little bit of deck tan to her teeth so that they stand out. And then I did not film this at all, but I mixed a little bit of Orcish Dermis and Blood Angel's Red together to make the lip color. And then I'm going to work on the rest of the features of this portrait, and I'm going to use the same base tone that I used for the hair on the eyebrows as well. These eyebrows are pretty well sculpted, and so it's the kind of eyebrows that you can literally just paint solid, like solid worms across the forehead, and they won't look too crazy bad. It means it's easier for people who struggle to get the whole fine line little hair things going inside of the eyebrows, and it's not that difficult to do them like I'm showing. I do also put a little bit of makeup on using a bit of Griff Charger Grey. I spray that into the eyeshadowed area, and the rest of the makeup is basically the same as I paint all other eyes, and this is using a bit of black over the eyelids, and also the eyelashes themselves. On the bottom eyelid there isn't any eyelashes, so you can make a couple of little tiny little stripes there if you want, or you can just paint a very thin line underneath, and that will give you an eyeliner looking effect thing. I'm going to use some white, which is actually highlight skin and not white and all. It's basically a ivory kind of color, and I'm going to paint that into the sclera of my eyes. I'm going to be very careful not to paint right up to the corners and try to keep the shape of the eyes themselves. And once that's dried, I'm going to quickly paint her earrings in this purple metallic color, because I don't actually know what color they should have been, but we won't worry about what I don't know. I'm going to use a little bit of copper to dry brush into her hair. She has a reddish browny kind of hair color, perhaps more on the red side, and I just chose to do a little bit browner than normal, and that's okay. You can do whatever you want. That's the whole point of painting things. But a little trick with red and brown hair is to use copper in order to bring out some highlights. It makes the hair look like it's glimmering a little bit. And that's that about the hair. There's no more information I can tell you. She has green eyes, and this may seem a bit weird to you, but to set them up, I'm going to set them up with brown. A very sort of dark, desaturated brown at first, and then using a bright green, I will paint in the rest of the iris color, and then take a little bit of black, obviously, to make the pupils. And then the only part of a model that I'll use actual pure white is the specular highlight on the insides of the eyes. I do a big one on the one side and a tiny one on the other, and then I will take some gloss varnish and place this very carefully. I will paint over the lips, also making sure to get it inside the mouth, and then very carefully painting it into the eyes themselves. I can now put this head on the model and call this whole entire thing done. I hope this video gives you some insight into model making, model painting, whatever it is that you want to call the thing that I've just done on the screen that you're watching it on. There was a lot of new and weird techniques in this video, which I really hope might help give you an idea for a project or something that you're going to work on in the future. It may not obviously be the exact same model, but the techniques and the concepts are still the same, and I hope that it just helps you to think a little bit outside the box for your own projects in the future. Of course, we are coming to the end of the video. This is the part where I tell you that if you are sitting on the toilet watching this, make sure to wash your hands, because we all know that it's gross if you don't. But what's very important is for you to wash your hands and then click the like button on this video. Click subscribe, because for every new subscriber I get, I will have one more new subscriber. And this is also the part of the video where I get to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons, because without them I couldn't keep that light blinding my eyeballs and the videos rolling every single week. And this is the end of the video where I tell you that if you didn't like anything you saw, I'm pretty sure that you already know what I'm gonna say, and it goes like this. I don't care. Now f*** off.